Lewell, and it is a true pleasure to serve under your chairship. It was over a decade ago that the automotive industry, and indeed the world, was rocked by Dieselgate, the VW emissions scandal. The public was horrified to learn how the trusted German car giant Volkswagen, the one that gave us the Herbie Kids film franchise, the one that gave us those iconic circular badges that were so beloved of the Beastie Boys, they found out that these had been knowingly faking vehicle emissions tests via defeat devices. That is software designed to alter a vehicle's performance, falsifying results and limited emissions during the regulatory testing period, only to switch to their true polluting selves when they were driven on open roads. And VW's range of diesel compact cars had been marketed as a green alternative to petrol, but it was found that they'd actually been knowingly cooking the books to the points that the US Environmental Protection Agency found their top people guilty of conspiracy to defraud customers. Confidence was shattered. Share prices nosedived. Reputational damage was done. Vehicles were recalled. Fines were paid out. Heads rolled at the managerial level. And the once encouraged fuel diesel became discredited, and its fate in London, I feel, was sealed finally by ULEZ. But we were assured lessons would be learned. Yet, despite the outlawing of defeat devices, the problem seems to be wider than originally thought. Dieselgate 2, the sequel, is proceeding very slowly through the courts. I think there's a number of cases. And that one accuses multiple models and manufacturers of the same thing, spewing out dangerous, excessive emissions due to cheat technology, deceiving drivers, knowingly doing this. And, you know, it feels a bit like match fixing for us of a certain age. Bruce Grobbelaar is coming to mind here. And consumers have been conned, once again, into believing they were driving greener, cleaner diesel cars. And there have been rigged results here. And it feels almost you can't go on the internet now without some sort of pop-up advert rearing its head. Have you driven a Mercedes, Ford, Nissan, Renault, Citroën, Peugeot during X and Y years? If so, click here to see how much compensation you could get. It's all a little bit ambulance chasing, isn't it? I certainly will.
First of all, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Ealing Central and Acton for bringing this forward? And she's right to say that this is something that just doesn't happen in England. It happens across all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Vehicles registered in Northern Ireland in 2015 were amongst those fitted with illegal software during the Volkswagen emissions scandal. Enforcement action uncovered diesel lorries operating in Northern Ireland with illegal emissions cheating hardware, deliberately disabling pollution controls. For 17 years, our MOT system in Northern Ireland failed to properly test diesel emissions, allowing such vehicles to operate undetected for too long, whilst damaging air quality and undermining trust in regulations. Does the Honourable Lady agree that more must be done to close regulatory gaps, strengthen enforcement, and ensure that defeat devices are fully eliminated from all our roads in all of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland?
Yes, the honourable gentleman makes such an excellent point, as he always does, and it is an honour to be intervened on by him. This was done with intent all over the British Isles, as he says, all our nation states. And he talked of the VW scandal. As I say, there could be worse round the corner. VW could just be the tip of a very murky iceberg. And yet, despite the outlawing, as he said, of these defeat devices, look, this isn't a subject, as he points out, actually. It's not just one about the men in the white coats in their laboratory technical results. This is not a fringe issue. It affects all of our constituents. It has real-life consequences. And air pollution is one of our most pressing environmental challenges. Noxious nitrogen oxide emissions can cause respiratory illness, cardiovascular disease, and childhood asthma, even premature deaths, which have been quantified. In London, the city where we are now, where I'm an MP, the devastating human impact was so tragically illustrated with the desperately sad case of Ella Hissy Deborah, dead at just 9 years old, and the first ever case where the cause on the death certificate was pollution. And the family had lived by the South Circular. I've got the North Circular in my seat, the South Circular. Her mum, Rosamond, has been such a tireless campaigner pushing for Ella's Law. And there's also been Mums for Lungs, who've done great work on this. And Parent Power, who've had a breakfast event this morning over in the other side of the building. Look, you wouldn't... clean air is just... It's not a nice to have. It's an essential. You wouldn't force-feed a kid dirty water, yet we expect them to breathe toxic air. And while Sadiq Khan's ultra-low emission zone in this city has helped clean dirty diesel from London, we do know that children and vulnerable communities are the most susceptible. And these cars were bought in good faith. Remember the 2001 budget of Gordon Brown, in fact. In those days, diesel was incentivised. It was seen as environmentally superior to petrol because of the miles per gallon, because in those days people were not looking at NOx, they were looking more at CO2. And that year's budget, I think the road tax and certain things, if you had a company fleet, actually encouraged diesel. And in the aftermath of this scandal, the VW scandal, and I'd say just like the other ones I've seen since I've been here, contaminated blood, post office, this is a genuine scandal. We've actually seen the percentage of diesels as market share in this country fall from 50% in 2014 to just 5% now. But with this bigger Dieselgate 2 on the horizon, if defeat devices have dishonestly been fitted to vehicles and they've emitted pollutants at levels way beyond legal levels, way beyond the expectations of what consumers were led to believe, it does leave huge holes in government enforcement and regulatory credibility. It's poisoning people, and I've got a range of questions for my honourable friend, the Minister. And, you know, although these vehicles are not being sold from new anymore, figures from Mums for Lungs say that 7.5 million diesel cars are still on our roads. That's a quarter of all UK cars. But their emissions are responsible for 30% of total NOx emissions. And there's also the vans, the buses, the HGVs, if you add it all up. Action must occur. So, we do know that in autumn 2024, the Department of Transport confirmed that it is investigating the possible use of defeat device trickery by a number of manufacturers. But rather than delve into the lengthy legal proceedings underway today, I want to raise questions about this government inquiry, because it's at best sketchy, and it's bound up with public health and consumer protection. It all kind of seems shrouded in secrecy. And there is the prospect here of illegally high emissions and asthma in the equation. So every moment that the results are delayed puts more children's lungs at risk. And even at a time when everyone wants growth, Mums for Lungs have calculated that the UK economy is losing. Inaction on Dieselgate is expected to cost our economy $36 billion in the next 14 years. So, you know, there are many reasons why we should do this. So I am asking the Minister, my good honourable friend, to step up a gear. The sheer number of potential claimants of Dieselgate 2, which is 1.8 million potential cars, dwarfs the eventual settlement that came out of VW Gate. The 2022 settlement compensated only 91,000 consumers. So this affects every constituency in the nation. Your constituents as well, Mrs. Newell. So, questions I have. What is the current status of the department's investigation? What's the timeline for its commencement? Where is it now? When will it conclude? And what teeth does it have? I.e., what are the enforcement powers that the department's prepared to deploy in cases of non-compliance? The Environment Act of 2021 strengthened the government's ability to require manufacturers to recall vehicles where there's reasonable grounds to believe they do not meet applicable environmental standards. Is the department prepared to use these powers where appropriate? And where does the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency fit into this process? What happens to vehicles currently on UK roads if they're found to be emitting unlawfully high levels of pollutants? will the government consider requiring their temporary suspension from use until they're brought into compliance? Could they have a little bit of tinkering and be okay? After all, excess emissions may already lead to 16,000 premature deaths in the UK and 30,000 new cases of childhood asthma, according to one report from an international climate think tank. And as I say, Mums for Lungs have sent me overnight a whole load of new figures that I've not entirely processed, but I can pass them to the Minister. And if manufacturers are found to have breached the rules, who bears the financial burden of remedial action? Surely not the consumers who bought these vehicles in good faith. They thought they were doing the right thing. They believed that they were compliant. And how does the government intend to safeguard public health in the interim? In 2016, the then Tory government launched an inquiry into the use of defeat devices by VW, but ultimately they didn't prosecute. And the Transport Select Committee at the time, they expressed concerns at the DFT's ambivalence towards VW's use of defeat devices. And they called the department being too slow to assess the use of its powers, i.e. they were asleep at the wheel. Now, this minister is different to that minister, and I'm sure he's not going to repeat the mistakes of the last Tory government. So now there is this second chance. The DFT should clearly prioritise the interests of the public and consumers with its current investigation. A decade after we were duped over diesel in the first emissions scandal, the public shouldn't be left wondering whether enforcement powers will be used if wrongdoing's found. And court proceedings, as I say, can take forever, but we must have assurances of urgency, transparency and consequence in the government's own investigation that's within its control. Communities deserve clean air. Consumers deserve honesty and protection. And I'm no Jeremy Clarkson, but as someone who, actually, I cycle more than I drive, but I do both, and I take public transport every weekday, I do find that it's difficult to know. It can be bewildering who's up, who's down, what's happening, because these goalposts are constantly changing. So what is it that's demonised? First it was petrol, then it was diesel. Now they've both been overtaken with electric, which we should all be doing. And I'm pleased to see the rollout of the Enviro 400 and 500 buses in London. But, you know, for the average consumer, it can be bewildering when the advice keeps changing and then, you know, feels a bit punitive. So environmental standards must mean what they say. If they're breached, there must be proportionate and decisive action. For far too long, motor manufacturers in the UK have victimised the public. They've misled consumers about pollution emitted by diesel engines, and they've put millions of citizens at risk simply because they live or work near roads. And, I mean, VW did recover their reputation to some extent, certainly on the, what's it called, the neighbourhood app, Nextdoor, that's the one. You see people still complaining that badges are being nicked from front of cars. So whoever's doing that, can you stop doing it? It's completely unnecessary to be removing the circular VW logo. But what I will say is that these companies should come clean and make things right with those that they've harmed. The government should do everything in its power to ensure that the public is in the driving seat. We should not have to wait, Ms. Liu, for Dieselgate 3.